record this, and what I wanted to do is record the intro lecture tonight that many of y'all have heard, but it'll be a little bit different from what we're gonna be doing, and definitely want to bring in some new aspects of what we're going to be doing this week. But first, I guess one of the parts of the project we're still on is doing the phase 2 work on the home farm. And so we've got several sites we're going to be investigating this spring and summer. And of course, my cat just arrived. Hold on. She's going to start scratching at the door. Oh, no. Hello, Kitty. There you go. Yeah, there you go. All right. That will stop Tina. Sorry about that. But we're going to be, we're excavating a slave quarter right now that we found back in 2005 when we were building the visitor center. And I'll talk a little bit about that near the end when I can show some maps of that area. But and I got some pictures from last week's dig that I can show you as well on the share screen. But before we get into it, one of the things we always talk about is, the power of place. And this is something that, means different things to different people. And I know a lot of y'all have heard about the power of place and thought about this. And I always am interested to see how people's answers to that change, depending on what's going on with politics right now. But what comes to mind when you think of power of place?
Well, for us, of course, we love Montpelier, and at our age, it's someplace nice that we can still go, and we're still able to do everything out there. It's the tranquility of it and the history of it that keeps us coming back
and looking for that next artifact.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely a power of place, in the unit. So, and this is, so many people come to, these programs, not necessarily because it's Montpelier or a presidential home site, but because of, the archaeology work. And that's, right. And people have come for the archaeology work and left, and then have come back because it's Montpelier as well. So
yeah, that's exactly,
me.
That's exactly my experience too.
Yeah, I came for the archaeology. It's hard to find an archaeology program that allows, everybody knows this now, that allows public citizens to participate without being professionals or graduate students. So that's what got me there first. But then I stayed because of the power of the place, because there's a story that needs to be told. And Montpelier is a huge chance to tell that story, to fix what we all got taught about history that's so wrong, and to start showing the true history of this country.
But the evolution of the history coming forth is what is very impressive to me.
So again, I might be the only newbie on the call, so I can't speak particularly to power place at Montpelier, but in my career, I did investigative work of civil rights violations. And I will say that there is no substitute for being on site, none. And so that speaks to my own experience and knowledge that there is nothing like being there. You can't read about it. You can't do a Zoom about it. You can't do a phone call about it. That's as powerful as a hands-on.
And
so I'm excited by this.
What sites were those, Mary, that you had that experience?
So they were not archaeological, but I visited jails, prisons, psych hospitals across this country. And you need to talk to the people affected, not just the people in charge. You also need to talk to the people in charge, and you need to talk to the staff who are hands-on with the people affected. And you need to talk to the communities who depend on or interact with those communities, right? So, you know, when you do police misconduct, institutional, and I did that too. And when you do that, you can't just talk to the police department brass, and you can't even just talk to the rank and file. You need to talk to the people who are encountering the police in their daily lives and understand, you know, where's the breakdown? Because we never go to any place that's working, right? We only go to places where there's breakdown. And
Yeah.
so anyway, so I find this to be very consistent with that own life experience of my own, that there is just nothing like being at the place.
And that's
Come for a
where,
good place this week, next week.
Yeah, exactly.
and that's where the descendant community is so excited about the archaeology, because there's I had some deep discussions with a number of the descendant community, and one thing that several people have said is what the landscape represents to them is it's a memory device, and what we can do with the archaeology is recover memories, you know, a form of memories that isn't recorded in the documentary record, because none of this was written down, and the records that were there at Montpelier were burned in the 1850s, you know, the agricultural records, the farm books. And then in terms of oral histories, all of those, except for a few scattered, are gone. And this was disrupted when the enslaved community was sold in the 1830s and 40s, because with families being separated, basically there was no one to pass that information on to the next generation. And so with parents being separated from children, brothers and sisters separated, you know, that broke that line of storytelling that's so important in African American you know, preservation of family history. And there's been a few families like Betty's family where there was, you know, there were fortunate connections that were able to be made after and right before emancipation that brought people back together. But once that's severed, I mean, that's where, you know, not only do you lose these memories when someone dies, but if they're not passed on, then they're forever gone. And that's where, you know, the archaeology, fortunately, no one ever saw fit to realize that the trash and the building remains that were at these sites could be used to recover information about what happened under slavery, because they probably would have done a cleanup, gotten rid of that information. And, you know, Madison, I feel like if he could look down and see us right now, he'd be, you know, probably rolling in his grave until he realized that what we're able to do and the work that we all do, like what we're going to be doing next week, is actually a critical part of understanding what went into the Constitution, not just in terms of the labor that was taken from enslaved Americans that built America, but also the whole concept of Madison's ideas about liberty were informed by the need for him to preserve slavery and to be a slave owner. I mean, part of being founding this country was protecting the economy, and that economy was based on slavery. So when you think about property ownership in, say, 1790, 1780, it's not just land, it's human labor and humans. I mean, they were human beings enslaved or capital. And if that capital was taken from slave owners, there would have been no economy in 18th and 19th century America. And there would be no, you know, America would have never been on the world stage in terms of being a global economic power that it was by the time you get to the Civil War. And so much of this, you know, we're able to get to with, you know, the archaeology. And that's where, you know, on a, you know, power of place, you can look at it, you know, on a micro level, on a landscape of, you know, what was a hill today with nothing on it was a blacksmith shop. And that's the power of being able to understand what was there. And then there's the power of what that represents in terms of, you know, influencing Madison's ideas. I mean, being at not just another plantation, but the home of James Madison, that imbues a whole nother set of power to what we have and the stories we can tell, because we're not selling just another story of a Virginia plantation and the story of the enslaved people that were there. This is the founding of the country. So it's, you know, it has a lot of meaning. And I think that's why there's so much contention and debate going on right now. It's this, what is being debated right now is more than just about Montpelier. It's the American story and how that is to be told. And so you all are, you know, we're all part of this history. You know, today, this is the history that 30 years from now is going to influence where we are. And so it's exciting, and it makes it meaningful to do the work that we do. We're not just looking for artifacts. You know, we're looking for the stories of people and the stories of where we've been. So
one of the things that, you know, from our very first expedition back in 17, that has stuck with me forever, and something I had never, ever thought about. And that was the fact that when Dolly was getting ready to sell, she had all this land, but she had nothing. Because if you didn't have slaves, you could have 5 million acres and you had nothing.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
had never thought of it like that, because I just never was. Central Illinois, I really wasn't exposed to any of that. And, you know, we segregation, I don't think I even heard about it in my growing up years. And so that was a real awakening for me, and something that's really stuck with me.
Yeah, the power of that land can only be harvested with human labor. And it's something that, yeah, you all will, for Mary and Bruce, and a couple of other folks that are going to be watching the recording of this, you all will see an exhibit called The Mere Distinction of Color. And in that exhibit, we, you know, really unpacked this connection between slavery, race, and the Constitution, and bring that out. And it's something that we, you know, the MDC and staff are very interested in looking at that exhibit and trying to see how to make it more effective. And it's something I want to talk with you all when we go through it this week or this next week. So, but what I'll do is, it's already 7:30, and I don't want to keep you all too long on the call. What I'll do is I'm going to start the PowerPoint. I'm going to share screens here. And what I wanted to do is a really brief overview of the history of Montpelier, and not keep you all till like 9 o'clock tonight. So, but the Montpelier, you know, as you all see, you know, one of the main focuses that people think about is the house. But with the 2,700 acres, the house is just, you know, a tiny, tiny part of this, you know, 2,650 acres that is shown in this white outline right here. And we'll talk about, you know, how to experience more of this while you're here with the trails that we've got. We've got some new trails on the property. But so much of what we've done with archaeology has been, you know, looking at home sites, and, you know, initially with the restoration, the investigations of the main house, and then over the past decade, excavating the remains of the slaves of the homes for enslaved families living in the South Yard. And then, you know, I guess it was about 10 years ago, we did excavations at the home farm and found the remains of the homes of enslaved individuals who we initially thought were field workers. But from the work we've done over the past 2 years, it looks like this home farm, and I'll get into this in a second, was a major craft complex. And so these structures that are down the hill from the visitor center represent these home spaces. And this is where, you know, we've gotten so many artifacts. You know, the ceramics and glass that are present there are you know, you have a massive amount of these. But what we're doing right now, and this week is a little bit of an exception, because we were actually excavating it's a slave quarter, but it appears to be not the same level of occupation as these other homes that were occupied for 30 years. It's in a curious location. I'll show you in a second. It's right above where the farrier shop is. I don't know if y'all remember the farrier shop down in the swale there. I'll show you that in a second. But at the sites we're looking at, there, everything from storage sheds to granaries to stables. The kind of artifacts we're finding is much less, nails, mainly through metal detector survey. And the other sites we're looking at the home farm are areas of fields. In fact, later on this summer, we're going to be doing excavations where we found evidence for gardens from Dennis's metal detector surveys. And we want to try to see, we're not going to excavate a lot of units there, but we want to try to see if we can find evidence for planting holes and things like that that would indicate how these spaces were used. But why do when most of the plantations you visited, what are the sites that you normally see that you think of? Is it, more where people are living or where they're working?
Well, like Monticello, everybody wants to see Jefferson's home. But what they've done in the slave community gives you something physical that you can walk through and see what they were doing and how they lived. And
Yeah.
that's where I hoped for.
Yeah,
for us.
especially Mulberry Road. Yeah. And there, on one row of buildings, you've got a mixture of house sites, homes, and work complexes. And it's, a very different layout from what we have at Montpelier, but a lot of the sites we're finding some real parallels in these sites. And, because they were occupied at the same time in the same Virginia Piedmont. And with all these, what we're looking to do is, do full scale restoration. And this includes restoring all aspects of life at the plantation. And so what we make up for the lack of documentary records, we've got in spades with archaeology. And, for what we've got at Montpelier, the majority of the sites that we've got are from the Madison era. This is where you have over 100 individuals living and working at Montpelier. And then every generation of Madison changes the kind of agriculture or activities that's happening. So you get a whole new set of sites, basically every 30 to 40 years. So we've found with the metal detector surveys, we have just sites galore all across the property. And then post-Madison, not a lot, which is great. It's a preservation. After the Madison sell the property, it never goes back to the number of slaves. It's only 25 slaves. And then when you go into the post-emancipation time period, there's even fewer sites. And during the DuPont period, fortunately, another area gets developed altogether. I'll show you the map for that. And a lot of you all have explored the area of the what's called the Constitution Village, where the 20th century and late 19th century farm complex is located. But for all these sites, what we've done is what's in yellow here is the area that was owned by the Madisons in the late 18th, early 19th century. So about 3/4 of the landmass was owned. What's in white is owned by the National Trust today. And so we've got the core of the Madison plantation on the lands that the trust owns today. And what we've been doing is metal detector surveys all across this area, everything that's in green. And did you all get the latest story maps for the home farm in the East Woods? Did you all see those? Those are the GIS maps that have the results from metal detector survey.
Yeah, I think it was in one of the links you sent us. Or
Okay,
Melissa
good
sent
deal.
us.
And I've got in those, I've got the story maps, the surveys for the home farm updated in those. But what we've been able to find with all this is just, hundreds of sites all across the property. And what we've been doing from this is we've been able to really reconstruct, how different generations of Madisons were having their slaves extract products out of the ground, whether it be blacksmithing, whether it be agriculture. And some of the early agriculture that happened at Montpelier was tobacco growing. And this is during the grandmother's ownership of Montpelier. And I've got Chris and I just finished a paper on Francis Madison that we just got published. And if I can find my pen, I'll make a list of things to send you, because this is a paper I've been working on for 20 years, and Chris helped me knock it out of the park, which was great. So I'll send you the Francis paper list. And then by the time you get to the second generation of Madisons, this is James Madison Senior, and Nellie Conway Madison is the mother of James Madison. That's when the early part of the original main house is built. And one of the first, and we'll talk about this when we visit the South Yard on Tuesday, because that building is, as you all know, is complete. We just finished building that, and that's this planter's cottage. But by the 1760s, the main part of the brick mansion had been built. And during this time, what Madison's parents are having the slaves develop, and what the slaves are developing, is some of the earliest techniques for plowing in the Virginia Piedmont. And actually, the slaves who are running the blacksmith shop where the temple is today, Moses, he was the head blacksmith, are manufacturing these plows at Montpelier. And so you get a whole change in what crops are being grown. And Montpelier has some of the earliest diversification from tobacco into corn and wheat. And what Madison Jr. does when he and Dolly are married, and they have their first retirement at Montpelier from 1797 to 1801, is Madison starts, this is the future president, this is what right before he becomes Secretary of State, he starts developing ideas on scientific farming. And probably a lot of these ideas on scientific farming aren't coming from his head, but are coming from the experiences of the enslaved, who are witnessing how directional up and down plowing leads to massive erosion of fields. And so Madison gathers this information together in his 1818 address to the Albemarle Agricultural Society. And so he gets a lot of the credit for these ideas. And what the descendant community has asked us to do is really to begin to look at the landscape for what evidence there is for ideas that Madison would have had versus those that would have been developed from the hands-on work of the land. And so a lot of this, when you look at what we found in the Eastwoods, it's only from seeing how erosion occurs that you're able to develop the kind of techniques that we're seeing evidence for in the woods. So the scientific farming, this is where we're using the archaeology to put some of this together. And I don't know if somebody, I'm going to mute you, Bruce. Sounds like somebody fell asleep, so not sure though. But so for the scientific farming, this really, in many ways, comes to an end when the Madisons retire to Montpelier. And at that time, what happens is Madison writes that by 1818, from there up until when he passes away, they don't have a single profitable agricultural crop. And what they're beginning to do is basically to breed slaves and then sell them to the Deep South. And what Madison relies on is that when he dies, and he eventually dies in 1836, is that Dolly will be able to take what's at Montpelier, sell it, and recover the debts that the plantation has. And this is exactly what happens. And by the time you get to 1844, Madison dies 1836, Dolly moves back to Washington, D.C. And by 1844, Dolly sells Montpelier lock, stock, and barrel. And the most valuable parts of this plantation are the enslaved community. And the sale of the enslaved community is really what allows those debts to be recovered to some point. But even, as we'll talk about in the cemetery tour, Dolly didn't even have enough resources left in her will to allow her to be brought back to Montpelier to be buried. And so that's why we got the curious configuration of Dolly buried behind James Madison, because it's only in 1858 that there's a fund put together to move Dolly back to Montpelier to be beside James Madison. And by that time, she wasn't even able to be buried beside him because the obelisk was there. So we'll get into that curious history on probably on Thursday morning. We're going to do no, we'll do that on Friday. We're going to do that on Friday. So but with the sale of Montpelier, this is when basically all of the buildings save the main house and the temple are taken down. So by the time you get to the Civil War, there's not a single outbuilding left from the Madison period. And what that means is what was the area of the home farm is abandoned. This is where we're excavating now. Basically from the main house right here, all the way to the base of Chicken Mountain was completely abandoned. And the new farm complex is built where the lab is today, the archaeology lab is today. And so all of this area becomes archaeological site. And into, by the time you get into the Civil War, you've got these encampments that are at Montpelier, and Chris will be bringing you all out to the encampments. Those of y'all that want to see those again, otherwise you can sleep in that morning. And then for these camps, we've got all kinds of information. If you all are interested in any of the articles on the encampments, I could send those along. I'm not sure if those were part of the articles that were sent out. I can't remember. Have you all seen those articles?
They weren't part of what we sent out. So, and I would love to see them.
All right, I'll go ahead and send those. With what I'm going to do, Mary, is I'm going to record. I'm recording this presentation tonight, and I'm going to put it on YouTube, and I'll send out a link tomorrow morning with the recording for everybody, along with some of these articles. So what happens in the post-Civil War era is basically this is during the era when there's some former slaves that come back to Montpelier, and the Gilmores are an example of these that build a home. And we're, that's research that we've done in the past decade, but we're wanting to continue some of that work with some of the outside archaeologists that have been working with us, like Stephen Wolke, whom you all might have met. And by the time you get to 1901, this is when the DuPonts buy Montpelier. And fortunately, the DuPonts are, of DuPont chemical fame, and they don't need to make money by having their workers plow the fields and cut the wood. So basically, the biggest change that happens to Montpelier is this picture. You all know this is my favorite one. This one shows what the house looked like in 1899. You can see the wings have the hipped roof that's been added. The house is completely stuccoed. And by 1902, what was the colonnade right here, that's a porch outside of the house, attached to the outside of the main block of the house, it looks like it's been sucked in with all these additions over the one-story wings. So the one-story wings, the DuPonts have their workers add additions onto not only the roof, but build out the house into the backyard. And so you go from about a 30-room mansion to a 60-room mansion. And these changes are pretty localized, not just to the main house, but to the farm complex. And the rest of the area is used as a country estate. And so when the trust gets Montpelier in 1984, what they inherit from Marion DuPont Scott is this massive pink house. And starting in 2002, we get a grant from the Mellon Estate, and we began the restoration of the main house. And as part of that, not only do we restore the whole house, but we also began work on the landscape and did excavations in the cellar spaces under the portico. So we excavated all under here, all across the main house in the cellars. And on on Thursday, either Wednesday or Thursday, I'm going to do a lecture with you all at lunch, talking about what we're doing to digitize all of these excavations and restoration. And Peggy's part of the volunteer corps that we've got to put all this stuff into GIS. We're basically developing a 3D model of the main house in GIS that's accessible to the public. And I'll send the story map for that. Story map GIS, and because you can actually explore the main house in this model. But what we started in 2006 was doing excavations to recover what the landscape looked like. So we knew there was a front fence somewhere. We did the archaeology, found literally the post holes from that fence. And this is the squared off posts that we found. And in doing the excavations, we've figured out that this painting from Baroness Hyde de Neuville actually reflects what's in the archaeological record. And so we use the documentary record and the archaeology to actually reconstruct what this space looked like. And so we've taken that same model and extended it not only to figuring out the front part of the house, but also restore the temple and the entrance to the temple, to the ice house that's below it, because there's a 25-foot deep ice house that's below this temple that's right here on this landscape. And these are all, all these are 3D maps that I've been in a program called 3ds Max. And what we're doing now is we're bringing all these models into GIS. And the great thing about GIS is you can actually look at these models at home. And so the story map I'm going to send you has a little bit of this in it. We're still working on this, but we're basically creating a 3D environment where all this information that we've done with the archaeology and the architecture can be embedded in these models. But for many of y'all did the excavations at the Pine Alley and the Grove. We've restored those spaces. These are these areas of plantings. So when you were approaching the house from the front, what was focused on was the front portico and the architectural grandeur of the house. And these plantings screen from view the work areas that were to the side, the south yard and this cooking area, which also had this amazing trash deposit we call Dolly's Midden, where we found the French porcelains, these transfer wares, just an incredible set of information that told us information we didn't even know about the Madison's dining habits, because there are no records talking about what the Madisons used at their table, except for a few items that have been saved of this Nast porcelain that's in the White House Museum. But so literally, we were able to put together the landscape and the dining room from all this, and then also figure out how the landscape in the back lawn was leveled out, as well as the garden terracing. And if anybody's interested in some of this landscape history, I've got a recording, several recordings on the Lunch and Learn series, and I'll send that link to you all as well. If you all are having trouble sleeping at night, there's probably like about 60 hours of videos that you can watch on all these sites. So, and then the final area that we've looked at that so many of you all experienced was the actual South Yard. This is the area of where enslaved domestics were living and working, everything from the dwelling for servants, the servants' dwellings as they're listed in 1837, the smokehouses, and then this blank area where, when we did archaeology, we found the remains of the kitchen. And on Tuesday morning, I'm going to give you all an in-depth tour of the South Yard and what these archaeological discoveries were. In these spaces, we found enough information with the archaeology to be able to reconstruct this space with the same degree of accuracy that we did with the main house. And so, in the early teens of 2000 and teens, we excavated the dwellings, these two structures right here with the stone and brick chimney bases. And we actually found a barbecue trench in 2011 that I'm hoping that we're doing a program in the South Yard at the end of April. I'm hoping we're still doing this. It depends on whether Jerome is able to come based on what happens tomorrow, but we'll be able to let you know about this next week when you arrive with the politics happening. But what we're able to do is figure out enough about this space to know, where to do our excavations. And, we just had an amazing set of excavations for the past decade, looking at the smokehouses, looking at where the kitchen was, that turns out to be the planter's cottage, and then also the spinning house or north dwelling. And like we'll talk about on Tuesday, one of the most amazing parts of this experience was working with the descendant community. And this is where, we not only partnered with the descendant community on the excavations, but also came up with the exhibit, The Mere Distinction of Color, that we crowdsourced from oral history, from testimonials of descendants, and a lot of meetings, and, getting to, learn how to tell, the stories that are at Montpelier beyond, Mr. Madison's story, but tell, a personal story of slaves and Mr. Madison that bring both to life. And I think one of the most valuable parts of this story has been really to humanize both sides of that equation, not only humanize the enslaved lives at Montpelier, but also to humanize who Madison was. Because when you look at these founding fathers as gods who are, they're characterized in that way in some late 19th century texts, with the kind of the glorification, it diminishes their accomplishments. I mean, they were people that were extraordinary people, and with the circumstances, what was happening, they were able to step up and design, for example, with Mr. Madison, design a form of government that lasts with us today, despite the fact that America was experiencing some of the most horrific labor circumstances you could ever have with human labor. And so having a document that's forged out of this, alien concept of owning people and have it last with us today is something that bears testimony to what Madison created as a living document. And so understanding this place means that we can understand, where we've come from and what Madison was able to accomplish with the enslaved at Montpelier. And it really lends to an amazing story. And where we're at right now with all this is the home farm. And a lot of y'all have excavated at the home farm. And this is, all the sites that are out there. And Chris is going to give you a tour of these sites. But so many of, the initial excavations were at these slave quarters back in 2012 and 13. And since that time, Dennis has done metal detector surveys all across this area. And these metal detector surveys is what's allowed us to find a lot of these sites that are in red. So with the metal detector surveys, this is where, in the property as a whole, this map here shows the 20-meter interval metal detector survey. All of these little squares are 20-meter grids that we lay out the property with, and then conduct metal detector sweeps where we count up how many historic artifacts that we're able to find remotely with the metal detector survey. And how we do that is not only are signals marked, but enough signals are sampled where we know whether we're dealing with 20th century trash or 19th century historic remains. And then we do an artifact count in each of these squares. And so you can see in this area right here, where these red concentrations are, this is this home farm. And then over in the Eastwoods, you can see where some of these concentrations are here that are indicating other sites. So with these maps, what we're able to do is find the sites, but then with the nails, what are we able to do with the nails? What do we do with those?
Date the find.
Yeah. And the nail dates, Mary will go over this with you all on Monday. But the nail manufacturing changes basically with each change of property ownership. It's just amazing how this lines up. So each of these periods has a different type of nail. And so not only are we able to find the sites of the metal detector surveys, but also date them. And so for the home farm, if you get a blow up here, you can see here's the main house right here. Here's the visitor center. Dennis surveyed all this area in here without his arm falling off somehow. He spent 3 years surveying all this. And then, for this area, what we've been able to find is, where these sites are. And then what we've done is we've gone from a 20-meter grid. Just when Dennis thought he was done, we're like, nope, Dennis, you've done a 20-meter grid. Now we want to do a 10-foot grid and find where the buildings are. And so with a 20-meter grid, that's a big enough area where we can survey larger areas very quickly. And then once we find the concentrations, we go in and lay out a 10-foot grid. And so you can see with a 20-meter, like where Mount Pleasant is. Here's the family cemetery right here. Mount Pleasant is right here. The overseer's house is here, and the blacksmith shop is right here. On the 20-meter grid, all this area blends in. But when you bring on the 10-foot grid, all of a sudden you can see the overseer's house site pops up. There's the blacksmith along with 2 other buildings right there. Mount Pleasant, we excavated before we did metal detector surveys when I started in 2000 in just 2000. And so we don't have a comparison that we can use for this with this area. We do have an area we metal detected in here. That's how we found the main house. I just haven't found a way to integrate that data into our 10-foot data. And so what we've been able to do with this 10-foot grid is figure out where the buildings are and then begin to place our units. And so what this 10-foot survey has given us is enough of an understanding to build a 3D model of what this space looked like. So you can see up where the visitor center is today, that's where the stable is. This was all a horse paddock. The site we're excavating is just off this map here. It's the slave quarter that's at the top of the hill. And in this picture, what you can see, this is an overview of the overseer's site that we excavated in 2020. 2021, we did the blacksmith shop. We had all this blacksmith debris, as well as the forge location. And let me see if this video will pop up. This is a flyover that Terry did right before he left. So here's the overseer's site up here. The blacksmith site is right here. And Gail and Tony, we're flying into your unit right here. You'll be able to see where the brick pad is for that what we think is the forge, base of the forge. And then some of the other sites that we've done, and just tons of blacksmith material, just insane how much slag and clipped iron we found. And then the farrier shop, similar. I don't know, did any of you all see the lunch and learn we did where the interns gave their papers? Okay, if that's in the Lunch and Learn website. And so if y'all didn't see that, I'll go ahead.
I watched it on YouTube after the fact. It's there. Yeah.
Oh, you watched
it's
on YouTube after the fact. Okay, good deal.
Yeah.
Thanks, Becky.
Yeah.
So that one, we just, Nathaniel is amazing. He's one of our staff interns. He found, let me see if I can find this. He found a shot of the farrier shop. I'll send you a photo of it because it's in the email that I don't have open right now. He found a shot of the farrier shop from 1901 that shows the ram pump at the bottom of the hill, which just blew my mind. I'll send Nathaniel's email. I'm making notes here, ram pump. And when Chris gives you a tour of the site, he'll point this out. But at the farrier shop, what we found is the remains of we think is the blacksmith shop that's down in this area. And there too, we found lots of iron material and slag. And then the final site was what we excavated last fall, is the burn site, which is a tobacco barn that was used for smoke curing tobacco or heat curing tobacco. And so we've written this, we just got this site written up this winter. Emily wrote that one up and delivered that as a paper. And so what we're working on now, though, is the slave quarter that's at the top of this hill. And let me see if I can bring up the pictures. Boy, I've got too many screens up here from some of the shovel test bits that we've done. There's the kitchen renovations. Yeah, this is Dennis giving a tour of all his metal detector survey that he did. And here's the site where we're excavating. So these are the units. This is on Thursday. You can see how cold it was last week. And everybody was digging through all this topsoil. So they've gotten through the topsoil down to the good artifact layer. This is proof of this. And where this site is, the visitor center is, let's see, the visitor center is just off the screen. There's the visitor center parking lot. This is the back entrance to the visitor center over here. The farrier shop is at the bottom of the hill. There's the blacksmith shop over here with the overseer's shop site way back here. So this is at the opposite end of the overseer's site in relationship to the home farm. So we'll talk about this next week, but we've got this really interesting site that has this point of view over this whole space. And we're trying to figure out what it was. And, we've done shovel test fits earlier in the week. Here's a shot of let's see. Yeah, this is the crew 2 weeks ago doing shovel test pit survey with doing metal detecting to figure out where to place units. And some of the shots are of the shovel test pits. Yeah, here's Lizzie and Jennifer digging shovel test pits. There's the farrier shop down here. Here's Dennis doing metal detector survey. You can see the field quarters here. And then the blacksmith shop is just over here. So let me see if there's a view in that direction. No, I didn't do a view of the blacksmith
We
shop.
always call that Dennis's poppy field.
This is definitely Dennis's poppy field. Yeah, all these red flags are where he's found hits. The blue flags are a 10-foot grid. So the crew is digging the shovel test pits every 10 feet using the same grid that Dennis used for the metal detector survey. And the weather that we had 2 weeks ago was nice and warm. And then last week it turned cold for the expedition. So hoping that you all are going to hit the sweet spot next week with no rain, beautiful weather, and then lots of artifacts. So we've been working for about a month to get the site. So you all, it's ready for you all. So between the metal detector surveys, the weather, and the shovel test pits, and getting rid of all the topsoil, you all should be in good shape. So that's an overview of what we're doing with the home farm, how it relates to everything else. What do you all think?
Anxious to get there.
Very cool. Well,
Definitely.
oh, I got the train coming through town. I don't know if there's any questions that you all have. I mean, because most of you all are, this is for some of you all, it's the 10th expedition. So, but Mary, do you have any questions, or Bruce, do you have any?
I think I'm good, Matt. I would really like to look at those, some of those extra things you're going to send along.
Okay.
And I wish I was at Montpelier this week because I would love to get my hands on that book. I'm going to have to work all day and read all night to read that Descendants book.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
this is not a good combination to work all day and read all night.
No, that isn't. Probably good that you don't have it. You can read it next week. I think you can also get it on Kindle. So if you do Kindle, if you have a Kindle reader,
I'm a touchy girl. I don't do Kindle things.
I'm with you. I like my book myself. So
Me too.
although it's nice when you're like, my son and daughter do a lot of backpacking, and they've got the library in one book in one little thing. So it's super nice with that. So
Yeah.
One thing that just aside from, we still don't know our assignment for the village. Yeah.
Okay. Let me
We were
that's-
told. it's
thank you. That's a
definitely-
do now.
It's definitely at the village, but we don't know where.
I am
That's-
texting Melissa and Mary.
I suppose it'd be 8 or 9, but
Up next.
Alex, I texted Alex and she said, yes. we
Yeah,
definitely-
Alex has been in the hospital.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so she had
Hmm.
pancreatitis
Oh,
from,
wow.
I don't know what, I don't think the stress helped her, because she's been a one-woman show doing everything for the village, and they haven't hired anyone to replace folks that, because Riley left, and
Well,
yeah.
And she had, when we were there in the fall, she had COVID.
So, yeah, Alex has had a rough time.
Yeah.
Let me ask Melissa, can you get their room assigned
We'll be coming in on Sunday, but
on Zoom now? And I'm going to take a picture of you all right here for Melissa, so she knows why I'm doing this now. So there's, yeah, wave to Melissa. So attach, and awesome. With Alex being out, no news. All right, it's a garbled text I sent, but she'll get the idea. So it's a Matt text. So it's like, what is this? I guess I got to talk to Matt. So well, thank you. That's a do now. Does anybody else have any do nows? That's what Tanya calls it. It's like, this is a do now. Stop what you're doing and do it.
Yeah.
So
Well, this isn't to do now, but I have a question. The gate code, is that for like the main gate off 20 or is it a different gate?
It's the main
That
gate.
great big gate. Okay.
That great big gate. Yeah, you all are Montpelier family now. You get the gate code, you get the full keys to the kingdom. So, and I think a number of y'all are staying at Arlington, and then others are staying on in town or at an Airbnb, or where are you staying, Mary?
We have a farm about 10 miles away, a farmhouse
That's right.
Oh, cool. Whereabouts?
in Rochelle. And
Yeah.
it's actually a lot of our property is in sync with the Madisons, although the people that we bought it from, you know, the people that the original owners are not Madison wealthy, they're poor.
Okay.
But it's fascinating, like the periods of expansion, say at Montpelier and stuff, line up with when they rebuilt a house on our land. So it's all really, really interesting. Especially too, because there's a contrast, right? Like these are not wealthy people.
Yeah.
And yet this was, you know, when the land starts to be exhausted, I think that's probably when the land is getting exhausted at Montpelier.
Yeah.
So it's real, and our woods are probably the same ages. It's really fascinating.
I'm gonna send you. I'll send it to everybody. But it's a blog I wrote last year called "Out of Many Plantations One," and it's the story of the changing boundaries of Montpelier. Because Montpelier, now what we call Montpelier today, is an amalgamation of property that the DuPonts bought by 1920. Montpelier, as it was in, say, 1870, was a much smaller landmass than what the Madisons owned. And then during different Madison periods, they buy adjacent land holdings from earlier plantations. So you've got this, there's actually about 4 plantation lands that make up what's Montpelier today. And with Arlington House, that's, of course, you all know that's Newman family, which is, the Newmans are all very, very close kin to the Barbers, which is Barbersville. And the chair of the Montpelier Descendant Committee, James French, is a descendant of both, as is, there's a lot of Montpelier descendants who come from all this line. And what's wild is the Barber family. This is Governor James Barber, who was governor of Virginia in the 1820s. The Barber family served as executor to the Madison wills for 3 generations. So James Madison's grandparents, the executor for their will was Governor Barber's grandfather. And so the eulogy that was read at James Madison's funeral was read by Governor Barber. So there's all these connections. And of course, when the white landowners are connected, the enslaved communities are connected, because not only are the slaves interacting, because when Governor Barber visited Montpelier, he didn't go there alone. He had the coachman, he had his personal slaves, he had, you know, the valet. All these folks get to know each other, and when people know each other, you know, people start to have families, all kinds of things. So this is where, you know, this model of the community of that the Montpelier Descendant Committee has created is one that's based on the landscape, and that landscape is, you know, really it bears testimony. So yeah, that would be amazing, Mary. That would be very cool.
Okay, so I will read now. I will now tell everyone what I just texted Matt privately, which is that if, you know, I don't know energy level, obviously I've never done this week, but, you know, towards the end of the week, I would be happy to throw in a pot of chili and some beers if people want to see what a farm of this era looks like. We restored the house pretty authentically. So it, and we've spoken with the families that grew up, say, in the last 50 years. But our farm was a land grant in 1799. So the house is from about 1817.
Wow.
Wow.
So
That'd be
we
great.
could talk more
Well-
next week, but it's a super easy drive, and I would be more than happy to have folks over for dinner one night.
I'm
Yes.
looking at where Rochelle is. That this, when you, I'm going to send you the blog, but we have, that is all part of the Baylor tract. And with this is, we should talk deed research, Mary, because there's
Yeah, I would love to.
connections. That would be amazing.
We
So-
had, the Piedmont Foundation did a survey on the Battle of Jack Shop,
Oh my God,
pre-COVID.
yeah.
and their public report, they were looking for a place to do it and they did it in our barn. We hadn't put any equipment in yet, so it was nice and, acceptable to
that
have
is-
people in a barn. There was no oil stains on the floor yet.
Okay.
So,
That's
but
cool.
they did a
So are you in
terrible
Rochelle right
job.
now, Mary, or where are you at?
no, I live in Arlington, so we're in Arlington right now.
Okay, all right. Very cool. That's where my
But
daughter
we go back and
lives.
forth.
She's in Clarendon, so
Oh, okay, great.
cool.
It's cool.
Well,
Just not on Thursday night.
yeah.
Not on Thursday.
Not on
Okay.
Thursday. We could do it maybe on Wednesday. And then I know
Sure.
Friday, I've got, that's where my sister-in-law is coming in town. We're going to Florida so next week, this is gonna be funny because I get to see, it's gonna be awesome. I'll be able to see you all next week. And then I take a week-long vacation, right? I get the heck out of Dodge for a while. So,
That's great.
Yeah.
He goes to
What
his
time-
happy place.
yeah.
Matt, what time do we usually wrap up? On a
We
day?
wrap up around between 3 and 4 o'clock.
Oh, that's
so-
early.
Yeah,
Right.
you'll see it. You'll be tired by that time.
Oh, yeah, no,
so-
I thought it was like 8 to 5. I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this.
Yeah,
This
no,
is-
no,
this is
it's
good.
we in order for the crew to catch up with things on paperwork, they come back to get things recorded because there's at the end of the day,
Mhm.
we can't begin the day without closing up bags and getting paperwork
Mhm.
complete.
And Mary-
Otherwise,
And Mary, you can leave anytime you want. They can't fire you.
that's right. That's right.
No, I want to
So-
get every minute's worth.
No, but
Well-
people, they want to dig. I mean, I think if we had the dig day go to 8 o'clock at night, I think all of
Right,
y'all
right,
would be
right.
there.
Oh, yeah.
No, good to know. Good to know. All right, so
I think we'd have a
I'm-
lot of staff burnout though. So as much
Right.
as we love you, I think everybody wants to go home.
all right, so I'm gonna put on a reminder on my calendar. I would actually, it would probably work better for me if we did this on Tuesday. You think people could come over on Tuesday?
I think
Oh,
that would,
Because in Orange, Virginia, everybody fasts on Monday and Tuesday. There's no.
Yeah, the
restaurant
restaurants are all
that,
closed. Yes.
that would be
okay.
awesome. Yeah.
I will cook
Tuesday
on
is the starving
Tuesday.
time.
I will cook on Tuesday.
All right. Very cool.
Wonderful, Mary. Thank you.
This is great.
Wonderful. Wow.
Yeah,
Well-
it'll be fun.
And-
Well,
and
even
we
more to
have
look
a-
forward to.
and we have a vehicle, so we could pick people up at Arlington House.
Nice.
Well,
Yeah, y'all are bringing your mobile up. So
Oh, yeah. the
Tony
beach.
driving
Oh.
11 hours straight.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
good seeing you all. And I'll get the email out. It'll probably be tomorrow morning. 'Cause the YouTube
Okay.
thing takes a while to load. So, but looking forward to seeing everybody.
Yeah, same
Great.
here. See y'all
And
soon.
and
All
we're
right,
doing,
good night.
Matt, there's a dinner Sunday, right?
There's a dinner
dinner
on
s-
Sunday. So
So we'll
Yeah,
see y'all on
but-
Sunday.
yes, Sunday,
Yeah.
if you arrive at Arlington at 5:30, we can have some discussions and then we'll see what Melissa has made for dinner. She's not making the dinner, but she's buying it. So,
she's ordering.
all right. Well, good night, everybody.
Sounds awesome.
Great.
Take care.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you soon.